Tonight, on Presidential Perspective, we're taking a look into the spread of false political ads and what the major social media giants and 2020 candidates have to say about them. Good evening. I'm Alex Halade. In this edition of Presidential Perspectives, we are looking at an issue that has already played a major role in the 2016 election and even now is showing relevance with regard to the upcoming 2020 election: the spread of false information via ads on social media. However, before we jump into this issue, let's take a look at the state of the race. According to a Real Clear Politics polling composite consisting of data collected between October 30th and November 12th, former Vice President Joe Biden leads the Democratic field with 26% of all support. Close behind Biden is Senator Elizabeth Warren with 20.8%, and behind her is Senator Bernie Sanders with 17.8%. South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg and Senator Kamala Harris round out the top five with 8% and 5.3% respectively. Other candidates over 1% include Andrew Yang, Amy Klobuchar, Cory Booker, Julian Castro, Tulsi Gabbard, and Tom Steyer. It should be pointed out that Beto O'Rourke has dropped out of the race, and he did so on November 1st. Like last month, let's also take a look at polling done between the leading Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, and President Trump for the national election. A Real Clear Politics polling composite conducted between October 4th and October 31st has Biden leading Trump by 10.2 points, 52.1% to 41.9% in the national election. And finally, as promised last month, a brief update on the impeachment inquiry. On November 13th, the first public hearings in the inquiry began with it appearing likely that the House is poised for a party-line vote on the issue. A Real Clear Politics polling composite on the issue, with data collected between October 27th and November 12th, saw Americans choosing yes, Trump should be impeached and removed from office, over no, he should not be impeached, by a margin of 2.6 points. That's 48.3% to 45.7%, respectively. It should be noted that this poll focuses not only on impeachment, but the much heftier issue of removing Trump from office as well. With that aside, let's move on to the task at hand. Let's start with what is happening right now regarding the spread of misinformation through social media ads. On October 30th, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey tweeted from his personal account that Twitter would no longer allow politicians to pay for ads on their platform, saying, quote, "We've made the decision to stop all political advertising on Twitter globally. We believe political message reach should be earned, not bought. Why? A few reasons." Dorsey then continues on in a thread explaining the policy and the background for it. He affirms that get out and vote ads will remain on the platform and that the decision comes from a fear that false ads could pose a significant risk to global politics. While internet advertising is incredibly powerful and effective for commercial advertisers, Dorsey says that power can bring significant risk to politics, where it can be used to influence votes and affect the lives of millions. The scandal in all of this, however, is that Dorsey and Twitter's stance directly contradicts with the stance of Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg and his company. In an October 17th speech at Georgetown University, Zuckerberg affirmed that Facebook will not fact-check political ads in the name of preserving uncensored political discourse. The two companies have each remained steadfast in their stances since Dorsey's tweets, resulting in a major conflict between two of the largest social media powerhouses. So, with that aside, let's look at what this all means. Regardless of what the social media companies are saying themselves, this issue certainly has the potential to send ripples throughout the 2020 election, as has already been seen in the 2016 election. While in the 2016 election the focus was on fake news coming from international sources, most notably Russia, Facebook's decision opens up the potential for American politicians to exploit social media as a tool to mislead audiences through false ads. The reason that this is only proving to be an issue in the realm of social media, however, is that unlike television ads on social media do not have to follow the FCC's rule for political advertising, like requirements of validity and the attribution of political ads to their candidates. With a disclaimer, this means that social media ads have the potential to be powerfully corrupt agents for political gain. In fact, already controversy has broken out regarding this issue. In early October, the Trump administration released a misleading and inaccurate political ad on social media that started a standoff with Democratic candidates demanding that the ad be removed, and Twitter, Google, and Facebook refusing to intervene. In response, Elizabeth Warren would later retaliate by purchasing a political ad on Facebook that falsely claims Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has endorsed President Trump. Regardless, Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg have remained steadfast in their stance of not intervening in political discourse, including false ads. Thus, there is a heavy potential for misleading ads to play another major role in the 2020 election. Now, moving on, let's look at the logic behind Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey's positions. One of the key appeals that Zuckerberg has used to support his stance against intervening in political discourse on his platform is that such action would be an attack on free speech. While the sentiment certainly channels a decidedly American ideal, is there really any veracity to it? False political ads are already restricted by the FCC and FEC over airwaves, and we do not consider that an attack on free speech. Why such control on social media be viewed any more controversially? In fact, the reason that the government monitors political advertisements sent over TV and radio is because those mediums are considered to be sent over public airwaves, and therefore the government intervenes to ensure that those airwaves are not being manipulated to the detriment of the people. This raises another point. Is refusing to censor false advertisements in the name of maintaining free speech really beneficial to democracy? By allowing the public to be exposed to such false information, companies like Facebook are misleading members of the populace into supporting candidates that they normally wouldn't. It is true that our concept stresses that all voices, or at least those of the Democratic and Republican parties, should be heard roughly equally and uncensored. But should misleading information be considered a legitimate part of that discourse? That is the root question which we must ask ourselves when analyzing this situation, especially when it comes to taking a critical view of Zuckerberg's stance. However, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey's stance of simply eliminating political advertising altogether also comes with its own issues. Dorsey's stance comes out of a realization on the part of his company that they lack the capability to isolate false advertisements from legitimate ones, as evidenced in the scandal surrounding the Russian false ads during the 2016 election. Thus, he has chosen to absolve Twitter of this obligation simply by eliminating the entire issue from its platform. While this approach seems logical, it is worth remembering that politicians and their supporters may still tweet as much false information from their accounts as they want. They just cannot pay for advertisements that target users beyond their followings. Thus, despite this, Twitter will still have the potential to serve as a dangerous source of misinformation in the 2020 election. In addition, attention must be given to the fact that Dorsey's decision to eliminate all political advertisements from his platform represents an elimination of political discourse on his platform and can be seen as an attack on free speech, as claimed by Zuckerberg. This is because Twitter is not simply eliminating false political ads, but all political ads, restricting the number of avenues that candidates have to reach the American public. While the amount of attention candidates gain from social media is relatively small compared to other spotlights, such as the news and television ads, it is still restriction nonetheless. Thus, the question that must be asked when analyzing Dorsey's stance on the issue is whether or not the elimination of political ads on Twitter has the potential to be more harmful to candidates than helpful. Regardless of the logic behind these two stances, an interesting tangent has developed during this debate. Amidst this argument, both sides have claimed, and to a certain extent proven, that money has not had a major influence on their decisions. Both Facebook and Twitter have released revenue figures regarding their earnings from political ads from the 2018 midterm elections, and in both cases, the numbers are just a small fraction of their earnings for that quarter. Facebook's recent $5 billion fine from the Federal Trade Commission was more than 10 times the revenue that the company makes from political ads, according to Zuckerberg. Meanwhile, Twitter made less than $3 million from political ads during the midterm elections, while the company made $824 million in revenue overall during that quarter. While these figures would likely be inflated during a presidential election, they're still a testament to just how minor a role money plays in this debate. What is intriguing, however, is that both Facebook and Twitter have used money not being a factor as a tool to back up their stances in two wildly different ways. Facebook has argued that it is operating at the benefit of the people by fighting for their concept of free speech while incurring little financial gain. Meanwhile, Twitter has used the small earnings to highlight just how minor an impact political advertising plays in the grand scheme of things to counter against claims of censorship. Thus, while money may not be playing a direct role in this debate, the lack of financial benefit for these countries is certainly being used as a tool by Facebook and Twitter to support their stances. Now, let's move on and take a look at what President Trump and the candidates have to say about all of this. With regard to President Trump and the Democratic candidates' takes on this issue, the stances rest heavily on party lines. Trump campaign manager Brad Parscale criticized Twitter, saying that the company was walking away from hundreds of millions of dollars and that it was a very dumb decision. Parscale continued, claiming that the ban was another attempt to silence conservatives since Twitter knows President Trump has the most sophisticated online program ever known, end quote. Meanwhile, Joe Biden's campaign manager, Bill Russo, lamented that Twitter felt the need to take such a drastic course, but he credited Twitter for not basing their decision merely on profit. Speaking to reporters in New Hampshire, Pete Buttigieg called Twitter's move a bold step that demonstrates a sense of responsibility. And finally, Amy Klobuchar took a strong stance, saying in a statement that Twitter and Facebook have an obligation to the public to ensure that their platforms aren't being manipulated to spread misinformation. She then called on Congress to enforce such a stance through legislation. While these are just the stances from a few of the Democratic candidates, it paints the picture that in general, President Trump and his campaign oppose Twitter's new stance, while the Democratic candidates tend to support it. Now, let's tie this all together. As we can see, this certainly has the potential to impact the 2020 election in a major way. Facebook's policy of non-interference could result in the repeating of the 2016 election's fake news scandal, except with the source being domestic rather than foreign. In addition, it must be remembered that Twitter is certainly in the minority on this issue as it stands. Like Facebook, Google, and other major social media and internet companies have also chosen not to intervene against false political ads. And while they may not have gained extended attention for these policies, they will certainly have a massive effect on this issue and in turn the 2020 election as well. So, while this issue is by no means resolved, we leave you tonight with the same request as always, to stay current on these issues and research them further for yourself. And, specifically with regard to this issue, monitor your sources of information and ensure their veracity. The truth is an issue that has found its way into every political issue in this era, and finding it is essential to educated discourse. And with that, from all of us here at Presidential Perspectives and D3 TV, thank you for watching and be sure to tune in for our next month for our last program of the semester. Good night.